So if someone asks you, where's the best sports bar in the capital region? Tell them Legends Field Sports Bar, inside the Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue, Albany.
What if there was a way to become a better horse player, to have a better knowledge of the game, to be more successful? What if there were a way to take what you've learned, what you know, and make better decisions, better choices? In horse racing, knowledge is a powerful tool. Race results and replays, past performances and live streaming, wagering from all your digital devices. Capital OTB. Become a better horse player.
Birdstone is an outside front. They're coming down to the finish. Can Smarty Jones hold on? Here comes Birdstone. Birdstone surges past. Birdstone wins the Belmont Stakes. It's in front, but here comes High Chaparral. High Chaparral, the defending champ, to take it to Bob. These two arch rivals head to head with Joe Hart bearing down on them. It's going to be a three-horse photo finish in the turn. Here's the wire. Photo finish.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. As promised before the break, joined now by the Executive Director for the Coalition for Horse Racing Integrity, Shawn Smeallie. We've had him on the show a couple of times over the past year and a half or so, kind of talking a little bit about the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, but that it was passed by both houses of Congress last week as part of the spending bill. I thought we'd pull Shawn in and get a little bit of an update. Shawn, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Seth?
Very good. Happy to have you on board, as I say, to talk about the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, which passed both houses of Congress, but now awaiting the signature of the president. So a little bump in the road there, but that it got through both halves of Congress says we'll see it sooner rather than later. But my question when it got passed was, and I'll put it out to you, what does this now mean for the horse racing industry? How and when will the horse racing industry start to see some changes?
Well, the implementation date is not until July of 2022, because it's going to take some time to, put the regs together and get all the various parts of the industry together to work, how this thing is going to be implemented. It's fairly instructive, the language in the bill, but these things take time, and this is a huge change for the industry, all for the better. But it's better to take the time to do it right than to kind of rush into it.
Well, talk a little bit about that. When we've had you on the show before, we have had you explain this, but for people who didn't see or need some more information, how will this benefit the horse racing industry?
Well, the most important thing is that every racing jurisdiction now is going to have uniform rules and standards and penalties. And right now, every state had their own kind of twist on the rules and et cetera. And trainers would, take horses across state lines, and they'd be under, completely set of, different rules on medication. So, in some states, let's be honest, we're enforcing them at different levels than other states. So this will make sure there's an independent board that's enforcing and implementing these rules, which is going to be a sea change. I think I told you the last time I was on the show, when they did this for Olympic athletes back in 2000, 2001, it took the responsibility for medication control and anti-doping away from the sport authorities and put it into an independent board, this U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. And within a year or two, it completely changed the sort of mentality with Olympic athletes, because now those who cheated were worried about getting caught, and those who felt they had to cheat just to keep up with the cheaters now felt there was a independent system that had their back. And that's exactly what's going to happen in horse racing.
And it's also in the same group, right? USADA is going to oversee the drug testing.
That's correct. So there's going to be two boards. There's going to be, one sort of the, medication control, anti-doping board, and then a track safety. And they'll all be under one general authority that will be put together. And that anti-medication board will, is in the legislation, is obligated to work with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency.
So the implementation, we're what, a year and a half away from when things will actually be implemented. But what is the process going on? Is this a state-by-state kind of a process in the meantime?
Well, right now what's happening is that there was a blue ribbon panel that was put together about a month or so ago. They're going to go ahead and pick replacement directors, right? And those directors will then seek nominations, or that group will seek nominations for a board of 9 people, 5 from outside the industry, 4 within the equine industry, okay? And then that board will then fill out the rest of the Anti-Doping Medication Control Authority and the Racetrack Safety Authority. That's underneath the broader 9-person directorate.
And so that board then is going to perform the implementation of the HISA Act.
Yeah, that's correct. And I expect that kind of be done the first quarter of next year, right? You know, the getting the nominations through and signing off on that. That's all going to be done within the first quarter. And then that's after that point, they're going to implement all the regs on the anti-doping side, then the track safety regs as well.
And we have talked, as I say, over the past year and a half or so, and it seems like this has become more popular within the industry, if that's the right word, over that time. Right. We have certainly heard various trainers and owners and whatnot kind of complain about the fact that you alluded to before, that different regulations in different jurisdictions just makes it tough on people in the racing game who want to follow the rules to be able to follow the rules when they're different everywhere. So it seems like, as I say, it's become an accepted thing. Talk a little bit about the organizations, the individuals who have jumped on board to support the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act.
Yeah, so I think the key word is Churchill Downs, right? So that we worked initially to try to get them aboard. He was very instrumental in that effort. He actually more or less knocked heads together and said, you know, you all need to figure this out. And so a lot of the major organizations got together and really worked months really to put this sort of compromise bill together that, you know, still achieve the goals, which were the critical ones, which was there'd be an independent entity, USADA, that would actually do the anti-doping implementation and regulations. That would be, you know, sort of independent board involved, and that we'd have uniform rules and regulations across all racing jurisdictions. And the great addition that Churchill Downs and others really pushed was to have the track safety aspect in there too, because this bill now addresses the 2 major issues we've had over the last 2 years, which was the equine fatalities in Santa Anita and other places, and then, you know, the FBI arrest of trainers and veterinarians that we had last March. So these are both addressed directly in this bill.
Yeah, and talk a little bit more to that point that really the racing industry for the past year or so, certainly with what happened out at Santa Anita, has been under fire a little bit. And you would have to think this will benefit the industry just from that kind of PR side of things, now that there is this one overseeing group and the rules and regs will be the same all over the place, and safety is going to be a priority.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see what used to take, you know, for example, on the track safety, if there was something that, you know, best practice that came up at one track, now that can be applied all over the place instead of having to go to each racing commission and each racetrack, right? That can be applied better. More importantly, is when it comes to on the anti-doping medication control, if all of a sudden there's a new substance that's making its way on the racetrack, we don't have to go through 38 different racing jurisdictions or state legislatures to get that drug prohibited, right? It now can be done in a relatively quick time through the Racing Medication Anti-Doping Control Board. And
USADA, again, kind of overseeing that look at drugs. And I'm curious about out of racing testing and that kind of thing, and freezing samples. I mean, I'm guessing that they become a more comprehensive kind of drug testing organization.
Yeah, so they're still going to use a lot of the you know, organizations that's out there now. So they in the bill, they can actually work with the state racing commissions, right? And so in some states they would actually, you know, set the standards and oversee it, right? And maybe that, you know, if it's a good state, right, that has a good program. But the key thing is that they will be the final determinant of how it's implemented, right? So if a state, that is a recalcitrant trade doesn't want to do it, then they can go in and take over that program. But it's having that, again, that independent look, giving clean trainers and owners the confidence that there's someone who's looking over it rather than someone's brother-in-law or drinking buddy type thing.
And I think you've tossed out a key word there, not just for the industry participants, but for players and bettors as well, confidence.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to add a level of confidence. And I will note, you and your group, Washington-based, but you grew up locally. I knew you as a kid, and you're a regular still at Saratoga during the season and owner. So you bring that perspective as the executive director of the Coalition for Horse Racing Integrity. And I think that's important because you're not an outsider kind of trying to put something on the industry. You're looking at it from, this is going to help us all perspective. And again, it seems like the organizations that have become involved over the past year and a half, we're looking the same way. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out over the next year and a half. And when it actually gets implemented, again, you say about a year and a half from now, looking forward to seeing this. And I'm anticipating it's going to be a very good thing for the industry.
It's going to be great, Seth. And I can picture you and I, betting this summer at Saratoga, not worrying about, whether or not we're going to have a bad beat by somebody who might be juicing or something like that. You're going to be so stinking rich. It's going to be crazy.
I like your thinking. Very good. Shawn, appreciate the visit. Just wanted, again, a few minutes to kind of update everybody on the situation given what happened last week down in Washington. And again, we'll kind of check in maybe over the next year and a half or so to get the progress, but looking forward to it. And looking forward to the betting windows at Saratoga this summer.
Yep. Great to be on. Thanks, Seth.
Appreciate it.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Shawn Smeallie, Executive Director of the Coalition of Horse Racing Integrity. And again, the bill passed both houses of Congress, just waiting the president's signature. But it should be a positive for the racing industry. We've all heard it. Trainers, owners, talking about, gee, I go here and this is okay to do here, and then I bring my horse over here and I'm in trouble. And this will change all that. There'll be the uniform rules across the country, and they'll have a kind of a stricter feel to them that I think will give everybody maybe a little more confidence in the game. And if you read down the list of the folks, the participants, individuals and organizations who have jumped on board this over the past year and a half or so, you'll see that the industry as a whole has kind of jumped on board and been very supportive. So seems like good news for all of us, bettors, owners, trainers, and the various horse racing entities with the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we will shift our attention to the really nice card at Santa Anita this afternoon. We'll be joined by Jon White, the morning line odds maker out at Santa Anita. He's live from Southern California when we come back, so stay tuned. Having trouble finding us? It's actually quite simple. Whether online or on your TV, it's never been easier to watch and wager on championship horse racing with Capital OTB. Simply log on to capitalotbbet.com. There you can watch our morning shows, live stream races, and wager on our state-of-the-art wagering platform. You can also watch from the comfort of your home on Spectrum Cable Channel 1250 or Fios Channel 467 and win more with Capital OTB.
No matter where in the world you are, the excitement of wagering on horse racing is just a click away. You'll get live streaming, past performances, race replays, our virtual tote board, analysis and selections from professional handicappers, a simple, safe, and secure wagering platform, and best of all, you get track prices. CapitalOTBBet.com. Bet any place, anytime at CapitalOTBBet.com. And be sure to download our new mobile app from the iTunes Store or Google Play. In a recent study of some of the top online wagering sites, Capital OTB won big in total player rewards, far surpassing some of the best-known wagering sites in America. While other rewards programs simply offer you points redeemable for gift cards, Capital OTB's rebates are paid to you in actual cash. Plus, Capital OTB gives you full and immediate access to your money. So if all you're getting now are points and cards, join Capital OTB Player Rewards today and get cash back. Visit CapitalOTBBet.com and sign up today.
Welcome back. As promised before the break, joined now by our friend Jon White from Santa Anita. Jon, good morning.
Good morning, Seth. How are you?
Very good. Appreciate it with the early start out there. Appreciate you're making some time for us. Just curious before we get started, what's the weather going to look like this afternoon?
Looks very nice. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day, which is kind of a shame in a way in terms of the fact the general public's still not allowed to go to the track. This would be a day that would be absolutely picturesque at one of the most beautiful venues in the world. But the good news is for horse players, it's also important because we're going to have a fast main track and a turf course listed as firm.
Yeah, very good, very good. I just had on, and I'll get your opinion, just had on Shawn Smeallie, who is the executive director of the Coalition for Horse Racing Integrity. We talked about the passage last week in both houses of Congress for the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, which puts uniform rules across the country, and it seems like the industry over the past year and a half has kind of jumped on board. I think it's going to wind up, he said, implementation actually is probably still about a year and a half away. But I think overall it's going to be a good thing for the industry. Focus on safety. I think from a PR perspective, it's certainly good. But I think just it's going to work out very well. Also, your thoughts on the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act?
Well, I agree with you, Seth. I think it's good from a safety standpoint. It's certainly good from a uniformity standpoint. Yeah. That's been one of the problems in the sport really all along, is the fact that you go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and what is a rule in one jurisdiction is not a rule in another. Makes it very difficult on everybody, but particularly horsemen. I do have one mild concern, and that is sometimes when government agencies get involved, things can not exactly go smoothly. So from that standpoint, I'm taking a bit of a wait and see attitude. But you mentioned another phrase that's very critical here, and that is a public perception standpoint, and racing really reaching a critical stage in its existence. It really needs to have this positive image as it possibly can right now. So again, from that standpoint, it's certainly a very welcome situation.
Yeah, and I think that's important to keep in mind as well, because I agree with you. The unintended consequences of having a government agency involved does raise some question marks, but I think overall, I'm certainly hoping, I'm knocking wood here, but I'm hoping it's going to wind up to be a positive for the industry. All right, let's jump in and take a look at some of the stakes action for this afternoon and get some of your opinions. And I talked on the Handicappers Report, our show, a little bit earlier with my colleague Brian Edo. I was talking about the Malibu, and then I went on to say, there are probably, half a dozen races a year that shape up like this with a couple of big horses in a showdown. You're really just salivating to watch, and that's going to be this afternoon's Malibu. While we talk, I'm going to pull up the Perryville from Keeneland back on November 7th. Nashville's going to win there. I was lucky enough to be at Saratoga for his debut effort. You had the feeling then he would be special. Well, he subsequently validated it in the allowance race at Keeneland, and then this Perryville where he looked great with a couple of triple-digit buyers in the last two starts. But it's Nashville and it's Charlatan, and then you throw in Independence Hall and 1,000 Words as well. It's 6 horses scheduled for the Malibu, but I can't wait. What are your thoughts on the Malibu this afternoon?
Well, one thing about it, the Run Happy Malibu, the opening day feature here at Santa Anita on a blockbuster 11-race card, is one of those fortunate situations in which this doesn't often happen or happen as often as we would like. And what I mean by that is really at the Breeders' Cup, that's when it kind of started that we might see this showdown between Nashville and Charlatan, because Charlatan was back in training and the Malibu was obviously on his dance card. And then when Steve Asmussen mentioned the Malibu right away after that Perryville, I get a little nervous because my mouth was watering. I wanted to see these two clash, but so often something happens and you only get one of them or maybe neither of them. Well, they're both here and they're both running this afternoon. And from that, I'm thankful and excited. It was very difficult making the morning line on this race. I tried very, very, very hard to make Nashville an odds-on favorite. I wanted to make him 4 to 5. Seth, to me, you mentioned you were there for that Saratoga debut, which was absolutely scintillating. Yeah. And to me, I mean, in that race and in his subsequent victories at Keeneland, he looked like the second coming of Mr. Prospector to me. For those long in the tooth that may remember the great, brilliant Mr. Prospector, who became one of the prolific sires of all time. And I think Nashville is going to be extremely tough to beat today. And I won't be surprised if he goes lower than the price I made him, 6-5. But then people would say, well, then why didn't you go ahead and make him 4-5? Well, I have to balance the race in terms of the percentage. And I certainly am not going to make Charlatan 3-1 or 4-1 or something like that. I made him a close 9-5 second favorite. What has he done wrong in terms of his races? Absolutely nothing. He was brilliant in his career debut. He was even more brilliant in his first race around 2 turns. And then with only 2 races under his belt, he took the big jump in class and was a 6-length winner of the Arkansas Derby. He was disqualified from the purse in terms of a medication violation. But as far as his races, Charlatan has never finished behind a horse and has been dominant really in all 3 of his races. And so you've got to give him his proper respect. And then originally I was going to make Independence Hall a bigger price than I did, maybe 6, maybe even 8, I don't know. But the more I looked at it, the more I kind of had my ear to the ground, listening to people I respect. I realized, no, I can't do that. So I made him 4-1, and he could set a beautiful trip in this race. If Nashville and Charlatan hook up in what could be a suicidal speed duel, personally, I think Nashville's just too fast for Charlatan. So Charlatan's going to have to prove he can probably come from off the pace a little bit for the first time in his career. That's the way I kind of see it unfolding. But there's also the possibility, in fact, Bob Baffert himself told me he's worried about Nashville and Charlatan maybe getting hooked up early. And if that happens, Independence Hall could be lurking right behind them. And he had a very good comeback race, his first start for a very good trainer in Michael McCarthy at Del Mar. And you get Joel Rosario there. And this was a highly regarded son of Constitution early in his career. So like I say, I didn't want to make him too big of a price. I made him 4-1. And then you mentioned 1,000 Words. And don't forget about Collusion Illusion. Collusion Illusion won a Grade 1 race against his elders at Del Mar, and he finished a solid 3rd against his elders in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship, and he didn't have the best of trips in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. In fact, Baffert mentioned to me he thinks he's kind of dangerous from coming from off the pace if the pace is too fast. You get Flavian Pratt, so that's a huge plus. So, and 1,000 Words has shown signs that he can pop up with a good race here and there. The only horse that looks like he's overmatched is Express Train, but by that same token, you got John Sherriss, one of the best trainers in the business. And you ever want to take him too light, don't forget what Red Flag did in a race, the Bob Hope at Del Mar, when everybody was dismissing him, and he not only won, he won by a big margin. So it's just an outstanding. There's only 6 in the race, so this is a case. It's the smallest field of the day. But boy, you talk about quality. We've got it in the Run Happy Malibu today.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to it. Again, and I'm going to be interested to see how it does shake out when they enter the gate as far as the odds. I think you probably nailed it. I think they will tilt towards Nashville. But Charlatan, as you say, has done nothing wrong. Far from it. Everything the horse has done has looked phenomenal. And it's Bob Baffert. And so this horse is going to take some action too. I'm going to be interested to see where they do wind up as they go into the gate.
Well, I certainly will be, because that's the case with me for every race at Santa Anita. Because I'll tell you, as a morning line maker, one of the first things is when a race is over and they turn the page, one of the things I monitor very closely is the first sign of betting that opens for the next race. So even in that, I will be interested to see how it shakes out. Not only, as you say, when they leave the gate, but even earlier than that, I'll be interested just to see how the own betting is.
It's going to be a lot of fun, as I say. Can't wait for the Malibu this afternoon. That's the 3-year-old boys, but as is the case out in Southern California, the La Brea for the 3-year-old girls. Let's get some thoughts there as well. This is a bigger field of 11 scheduled. I'm going to pull up the replay from the Chaluki back in November at Churchill Downs. It's going to be finite getting it done there. Her comeback after sitting out most of the middle of the year was a little bit disappointing on the turf at Kentucky Downs, but subsequently kind of rebounded, including this win that we're watching here as they come down the stretch. So finite is probably the way I'm going to tilt in the La Brea. But I thought Motivated Seller for Chad and Klarovich could be very interesting. Lightly raced Himiko just seems to have, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the Bob Baffert horse who took off that late summer, early fall break. She seems to have come back as an improved performer now late in her 3-year-old season. I'm going to be interested to see what she does for Baffert. Merneath for Baffert, also a player in here. Again, it's a bigger field. It's a fun field. What are your thoughts in the La Brea?
Well, we go from that short field in the Malibu to this big field that really is wide open. I went with Finite as the morning line favorite. I tried to make her 3, but even couldn't go that low because, again, it would have meant raising prices on elsewhere, and I just didn't want to do it. Part of the problem with this race for me and making the morning line, other than the one Princess Mo, who to me just looks like on paper she's biting off more than she can chew, there's no one else in this race that's really like overmatched. There weren't horses that I would be willing to make 15 to 1 or 20 to 1, like say a Biddy Duke, who is just so consistent and a step up in class. Last time it won the Grade 3 Senator Ken Maddie at odds of 9 to 1. So I didn't want to make her 20 to 1 in this race. A horse like Provocation, who showed such promise early in her career and is another Bob Baffert trainee, and you get Joel Rosario there. I don't want to make that silly 20 to 1. So that you have to pay the price at the other end of your morning line making, and that's why I didn't make Finite. I kind of wanted to make her 5 to 2 to start with. That certainly didn't work. Then I got to 3, and that almost worked, but not quite. I think she is the filly to beat, but this is just a wide open race. You know, Baffert was extremely high on Merneath early in her career. He talked about her as if she was, something really special. You could tell that by the way she was bet. She was 1 to 5 in her debut, and she got beat. And then off of that, she was 6 to 5 and got beat a nose. Then she went to Oaklawn and looked like the filly that he had been hyping. And so she's just kind of had this up and down career, so to speak, because after the Oaklawn race, she then lost her next 3. But it looks like she's going in the right direction coming into this race with back-to-back wins. So that's why I made her the second favorite at 4 to 1. You mentioned Motivated Seller. Well, when you get Rispoli and Chad Brown and a filly who's only a neck away from being undefeated, and her only loss was in a stakes race at Keeneland, and she's an into mischief out of an Empire Maker mare, boy, you better take her seriously. And another filly in here that I think you better not overlook on the outside, Stellar Sound, because when you consider how well she ran on this track in early October, that race would make her very salty in this race. She came back last time. It was a 6 to 5 favorite and was a disappointment, finishing a well-beaten 3rd. But keep in mind, that was against Older. That was the Grade 3 Bayacola at Los Alamitos. So now she's back with runners of her own age, 3-year-olds. And if you go back to just that one race back on October 2nd, Stellar Sound could make a lot of noise in today's La Brea.
No pun intended.
No, well, it was kind of intended. We'll say somewhat intended.
Very good. Very good. All right, let's take a look at another one of the highlights on the card, and that would be the San Antonio 7th race, scheduled for the 7th race this afternoon. Grade 2 event, 1 mile and a 16th, and it's just another fun field. And as I handicapped, I kind of wanted to go against Mucho Gusto, and just the more I looked and the workouts underneath, the layoff since February in the Saudi Cup left me thinking I wanted to go in another direction. But the workout said, I think Baffert's going to have Mucho Gusto already. So I wound up there, Sharp Samurai and Midcourt underneath for me, and I thought Combatant was intriguing in the race as well. What are your thoughts on the San Antonio?
Well, I made Mucho Gusto the favorite over Sharp Samurai. I think they're the 2 main players coming into the race based on their recent form. And I don't mean with Mucho Gusto his recent races, but I mean his overall form. And Sharp Samurai ran such a huge race, actually, in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. He got really in serious trouble early in that race and still finished a solid third behind the razor sharp Nick Sko or K-Nick Sko, and a pretty solid Jesus' team. So that was a big effort on the dirt. And don't forget, in his dirt debut, or not his dirt debut, but I mean, in a switch back to the dirt of the Pacific Classic, he ran a solid second behind Maximum Security that day. That was the race that gave them the encouragement to go back to the dirt for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. My problem with First Samurai, and one of the main reasons I didn't make him the favorites, he hasn't won in 2 years. So he's got a lengthy victory drought. He hasn't won since October of 2018. Mucho Gusto is the class of the race to me, no question about it. I mean, you know, his race in the Saudi Cup actually was pretty good. It knocked him out. He needed a lot of time after that race. But when you go back and take a look at what he did in that, Pegasus World Cup was just really a sensational performance that day. I mean, he just buried that field. He's worked well, as you say, Seth, into this race. Now, I think Bob Baffert is a little concerned that, you know, there could be some rust off the layoff despite the good works. I took Bob a couple of days ago, and Bob said, you know, I don't know about Mucho Gusto because of the long layoff. And I said, well, one thing about it, Bob, the main horse to me that you've got to beat is a horse that hasn't won in 2 years. And he went, well, that's a good point. Yeah. So, I think it's Mucho. And don't forget how well Mucho Gusto runs. That's something Baffert has told me more than one time. And that's one reason. Another reason I think he might fire pretty big today, despite the layoff, is I think now the plan is maybe not to defend his title in the Pegasus and give him the extra time to the Saudi, because the ownership, that's their main objective, is the Saudi Cup. There's Saudi interests that are involved in the ownership here. And so I think you might see him. Now, if he wins, and he wins pretty easily, he might go ahead and go to the Pegasus. It hasn't been ruled out. But I think now there's also a chance, because he runs well fresh, that he'll skip the Pegasus and just wait and go on to the Saudi Cup. Well, if that is the case, he might, run better today than people kind of think. And he has run very well fresh in the past. So here's the icing on the cake, Seth. What's his record on the main track at Santa Anita? Well, he's never been beaten. He's 3 for 3. So while Sharp Samurai hasn't won in 2 years, you're talking about a horse here who's never lost on the dirt at Santa Anita.
Yeah, and I liked, 4 of the last 5 workouts have been at 6 furlongs, and they've been good. So, again, I think that horse will be on its toes. It'll be, again, nice field in there, another fun stakes race on the card on this Saturday afternoon. Have some time. Go ahead.
I think the up-and-coming horse to keep an eye on in here is Idol. This is a horse, I really don't know how good he is, but I know this. I know that Richard Baltus is extremely high on him. He's sky high on this Son of Curlin. He thinks this could be one of the better horses he's ever had. And I happened to catch that race. I wasn't even intending to watch. I was just kind of flipping around tracks on November 8th and happened to see this race that he ran going a mile and 3/16, and he really caught my eye. Yes, he broke the track record at Churchill, but that's at a distance at Churchill that's been rarely run, a mile and 3/16, so that's not the big deal. But the way he won that race, so he's got these improving buyer speed figures, 81, 94, 98, and look at the pedigree. He's got every right to get better as he gets older, like a fine wine. He's by Curlin out of an AP Indy mare, so watch out for Idol. He's the type of horse that could be very dangerous. And Midcourt is such a goofy horse in terms of he can run a big race or he can run a clunker. So, Midcourt seems to be maybe not at the top of his game, and that's just the time he might go out and run them off their feet. So he's another one I wouldn't take too lightly.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out Idol, because as you were talking, the more I look, the more I kind of think that's one that is worth tossing into the mix. No question about lightly raced, maybe still some upside. All right, let's go back because we do have some time. The 4th race is going to be the Mathis Brothers Mile, 3-year-olds. I'd say it a million times. I said it already in the handicapping show earlier. I love this subdivision of 3-year-olds on the turf. I think there are nice races, nice stakes for these runners all across the country all year long. And this kind of puts an exclamation point on that subdivision out in the West Coast. Mathis Brothers Mile, a mile on the grass, as the name suggests. I thought Field Pass and Smooth Lake Straight been knocking heads with these types in stakes races for most of the year, and they maybe had the class edge. And I tilted towards Field Pass, but I thought Scarta was interesting. I think Whisper Not is interesting in here. What are your thoughts in the Mathis Brothers Mile?
Well, for one thing, I'll give a kind of a shameless plug to Mathis Brothers because they're a furniture company here in Southern California. And where I sit watching the Lakers and the Dodgers and the Rams and horse racing on my sofa, I bought at Mathis Brothers. And it's been a wonderful sofa. So we'll just kind of give them a plug since they're sponsoring this race. To me, it is Smooth Like Straight and Field Pass. I think the winner probably will be one or the other. To me, it is Smooth Like Straight, the one to beat in terms of that he handled Field Pass pretty well when they met up in the Twilight Derby on this turf course. And I was a little surprised that day that Field Pass didn't get a little more love from the bettors. He was 3-1 that day, and Smooth Like Straight was 6-5. And Smooth Like Straight won that race. It only shows a length and a half, but he won that race with authority. That was one of those. I mean, he was really more the best than that length and a half margin would indicate. So I personally will be surprised if Smooth Like Straight does not get the job done in this race. I made him 8-5. And I think he is going to be very, very tough to keep from winning this race today.
And we've talked about Rispoli in the past as kind of a guy who hit the scene and then made a little mark. And for folks who maybe aren't following Southern California racing on a regular basis, has he kind of held up that quality over the past 6 months or so?
Well, he certainly has. And in fact, I have mentioned this before, but only once in my life has someone come to me and asked me to be their agent, and it was Daryl McCart, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame as a jockey this year. And Daryl, back in the early 1980s, asked me to be his agent, and at the time, I was working for the Daily Racing Forum as a writer, and that's what I wanted to do, and what I've basically done for much of my life is be a writer or broadcaster. Also a racing official. And in fact, I've worked in the steward stand with Daryl McCart, who is the chief steward in the state of California. But the reason I bring that up is when Rispoli was first riding here, I was so impressed with him right away that I just thought, man, this guy is the real deal. And so he had Ron Anderson as his agent, and he also had Rosario. Well, when Rosario went back east, returned back to the East Coast, I knew that Rispoli was going to need an agent. And I swear, Seth, that the thought was strong with me that I was willing to give up my morning line jobs and my current jobs, writing a column every week for ExpressBet and everything else, to dive into the agent business and take Rispoli's book if he'd have me. And I was starting to think of how I was going to go to him and make my case. And then I gave that about a 3-minute thought, Seth, and then I realized, well, heck, there's one of the top agents that we've ever had in California currently available, and that would be Scott McClellan. And I thought, well, I can't, in all honesty, go to Rispoli and say, I should be your agent, when there's a guy here that I would honestly tell him he'd be a better agent because he's got all the experience. So that's how quickly I had to dismiss that notion. And to show you at least what a good handicapper I was, Scott McClellan became his agent. So, and they've been a very good team. So this guy is just I love his riding. I think he's the most known for his ability on turf, but believe me, this guy is an outstanding rider, turf, dirt, synthetic. I don't care if you could go anywhere, any place, anytime. This guy will hold his own with anybody.
For those of us here on the East Coast, he may be still floating a little under the radar because he doesn't travel around too much, it seems like. But that, I'm sure that will change, and we'll start to get familiar with him. But keep the name in mind, because if you do watch Southern California racing, he's been prominent there for a while now and worth paying attention to. Speaking of jockeys, let's finally take a look at the American Oaks. And I mentioned jockeys because I put Sharing on top, and John Velasquez scheduled to be in town to ride, talking about talented jockeys and guy Hall of Famers and whatnot. But Sharing, to me, last time facing older and the matriarch, a close-up fourth-place finish. I think getting back in against her own age group this afternoon, the American Oaks, she'll get back to the sharing we're used to. But duopoly and capital structure, I'm going to be interested. Again, this is one where I'll be interested to see where the betting public goes. You have them both at 4-1. And I think you're probably right on, and they're going to take action. I'm interested to see who maybe gets more action, though. But they're both lightly raced, maybe some upside potential. So I thought the Chad Brown-Klarovich runners were solid contenders behind sharing. But your thoughts on the American Oaks?
Well, this is an interesting race from the standpoint of sharing, because in terms of class, she is the one that deserves top billing in this race. I mean, her race at Royal Ascot in June was just, she lost, but wow, what a race she ran that day. I mean, she is a very talented filly. She's a Breeders' Cup winner from 2019, and she ran just in defeat a better race than a lot of people realize. I mean, she was right there, and maybe with a better trip, she would have been in the battle for the win for that race. She only lost by 3/4 of a length against really tough older runners. I happened to like Blowout in that race and lost by a whisker. That was a very tough beat. I don't want to tell you how much that cost me in terms of the bankroll, but there are questions associated with sharing. She shipped back to the East Coast. She had to ship out to the West Coast from the East Coast for the Matrix. Then she ships back to the East Coast. Now she's shipping back to the West Coast. So you have that. And then there's this distance question. To go 1.25 miles for her, maybe she'll like it. She certainly has a top trainer, so that's not a concern of mine. But I just don't know in terms of her being able to win 1.25 mile race. She's by a sprint champion, Spitestown. Now she does get stamina on the bottom, being out of a Pleasantly Perfect mare. Pleasantly Perfect, who won a Breeders' Cup Classic for Richard Mandela. But that, it's just a lingering question. Seth, I've had people tell me that they absolutely are throwing out sharing. They don't like her one bit. And I've had people tell me they love sharing in this race. So it could, here's another one just in terms of betting. I'll be surprised. I wanted to make her 5-2 on her class. But again, because of these question marks, that's why I went up a notch from that to make her a 3-1, more of a tepid favorite in this race. One that you did not mention that I think you better respect in here is Luck Money. Arnold Delacour, a very good trainer to me, and this filly is at the top of her game, back-to-back wins, a nice allowance win at Keeneland against a tough field there. But last time she beat older, and that's another key in this race. It wasn't a race for 3-year-olds. It was against 3-year-olds and up, the Zagora at Belmont. And you don't have to worry about stamina with her. She won 1.5 mile race last time. So if sharing gets a little shaky in terms of her stamina and gets a little weary late, it's Luck Money, who's cutting back in distance for this race, that should have plenty of gas in the tank late in this race and could be very, very tough. And then you mentioned Capital Structure and Duopoly. They both are also quite capable of being very tough customers in what is really a good race on what is truly an outstanding card at Santa Anita.
It really is. It's a great way to kick off the traditional winter spring meet and kick it off in a traditional fashion the day after Christmas, Boxing Day. A really great card. John, before we let you go, you mentioned your online column, and I had pulled up some of the online columns last night, and I wanted to touch on your it's a couple weeks old, so I'm curious now. I got a couple of questions. Your Kentucky Derby top 10 from a couple weeks ago, and I bring that up. You have Essential Quality on top for Brad Cox, certainly no surprise there. But you pulled in Brooklyn Strong on the bottom, which I was happy to see because I thought that was just a great story. Brooklyn Strong winning the Remsen. They paid a modest amount of money and a New York bred, and as they say, just a nice story. And it's going to be interesting to see what he can do going forward. I always plug into the Remsen horses. They win at 1 1/8 late in the year. You think, and they've disappointed now for a while. But Brooklyn Strong's going to be fun to watch. As I say, you pulled him in at the bottom of your top 10 a couple of weeks ago. Subsequently, however, I'm curious if the win by Spielberg has changed up your top 10 at all.
Well, not really at this point because he just hasn't come up with the buyer numbers that to me would justify putting him into the top 10 at this point. On the other hand, I'm keeping a very close eye on him that he could move into the top 10 down the road here from this standpoint. Pratt rode him for the first time in the Los Alpha-30, and Pratt was extremely impressed, even though they won by a nose and did so in the very last jump. The only time Spielberg was in front, you couldn't have timed it any better. It was right on the finish line, and he was only beating a maiden, but he was beating a highly regarded maiden from the Doug O'Neill barn, the great one. They've been high on him all along. They've liked him a lot, and he finally jumped up and showed why they like him a lot. But that race, to me, I wouldn't say that race was as strong personally as Brooklyn Strong's performance in the Remsen. I like that performance better. So I would not move Spielberg ahead of Brooklyn Strong at this point. At number 2 on the list, I have Life is Good, and this is the exciting runner from the Bob Baffert barn, and he kind of had a messed up workout here the other day. But I talked to Bob about that, and he said, just throw that workout out. We were trying some things, and a horse came in and joined him, and it all got messed up. But he said he'll work better next time, which very likely is today. And he's headed to the Sham here that's coming right up early in the Santa Anita meet. That race is coming up next Saturday, a week from today on January 2nd. And boy, if you go by the way Life is Good had trained before his first race and how he ran in his first race, boy, he is exciting. And Baffert has said he's got that raw talent like American Pharaoh, like Justify, and like Authentic, and like Gamine. So Baffert has made that statement, and that's when you have that kind of raw talent. And you have Baffert as your trainer, well, that's a potent combination when you start thinking of the Kentucky Derby, especially when Baffert got his record-tying 6th Kentucky Derby win this year with Authentic. And Baffert would like nothing better than to get that 7th to become the all-time leading Kentucky Derby trader in terms of victories. And Life is Good looks like he's the real goods. And so it's exciting here early in the Santa Anita meet that we're going to get a look at him. A big performance by him, and I could possibly switch him ahead of Essential Quality. But it was very encouraging to see Essential Quality get a workout under his belt already in New Orleans for trainer Brad Cox. And I love him a lot, too. He was my Breeders' Cup pick going against the heavy favorite in that race, Jackie's Warrior, because Jackie's Warrior had never gone around 2 turns, and Essential Quality not only had won a Grade 1 race around 2 turns, but had won at Keeneland a Grade 1 race around 2 turns. So at Express Bet in my picks, I picked Essential Quality, and I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of what's in store for him too. So there are 2 real quality 2-year-olds at the top right now of my Kentucky Derby list.
Yeah, fun. And Bob Baffert was a live Derby runner coming into who would have thought?
Yeah. Oh, we got to have some, as upside down and as many weird things happened in 2020, it's kind of nice to have something that isn't weird or upside down.
Yeah, you're exactly right, to have some normalcy out there. And I continue to knock wood that sooner rather than later, the entire racing game will be normal. I've said the past couple of weeks, hopefully with this vaccine things, as we get into summertime and whatnot, up here, we're certainly hoping for a more normal Saratoga this year, but all the venues. And you mentioned earlier, Santa Anita, no fans. What is the situation out there otherwise, though? Are owners allowed now? I'm not sure.
Yes, owners right now are allowed. They have to go through the TOC, which is the Thoroughbred Owners of California. But I'm nervous here because we're really maybe the biggest hot spot in the entire country right now, the Los Angeles area. Listen, Seth, just about a week ago, I heard on the radio, on the news, that they said, look, if you get into a car accident in the Los Angeles area or if you have a heart attack, don't bother going to the hospital.
Oof.
That doesn't send a chill, give you the chills right there. I mean, that is just, I never thought I would ever hear anything like that in my life. And it just, you talk about scary. And we're in a situation here. We're overflowing in our emergency rooms and intensive care units, and it's a dire situation here right now in the Los Angeles area. So I'm hoping this is kind of where we're going to hit rock bottom. And now that we have the vaccines, I'm hoping this thing's going to get turned around.
Yeah, I have a couple of nephews and their families who live out there. So I've been watching, and I'm rooting for you guys to pull through, everybody to stay as safe as possible. And yeah, knocking wood with the vaccine, hopefully things return to some sense of normalcy sooner rather than later. I think the racing industry so far has done a very good job. So we'll be watching Santa Anita. I think the protocols at the tracks have worked out pretty well over the past, going back to March at most of the venues. So again, hoping for the best out of Santa Anita, hoping the best for you and your family as well, John. Stay safe. Always appreciate the visit and the conversation. Looking forward to opening day and beyond, and we'll talk again down the road.
Great, Seth. Always great to talk with you. And I want to wish everybody a very early Happy New Year. And if there was ever a year I'm looking forward to turning the page to a new year, this is it.
Yeah, you and everybody else. John, again, thanks a lot. Appreciate the visit. John,
Thanks, Seth.
Jon White from Santa Anita, again, on a Saturday, kicking off their meet, which just has a phenomenal card. So you want to stay tuned to the network all afternoon for that play and watch and enjoy, particularly that Malibu, Nashville versus Charlatan. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. There is at Gulfstream today a 12:05 post, and I've been kind of keeping my eye to see when the pregame show is going to start, and it hasn't started yet, but I think it'll start sooner rather than later. I think they usually kick off about an hour before post time with their pregame at Gulfstream. With no Naira today, we'll plug into the Gulfstream pregame show with Ron and Jason and Acacia jumping in with some of their thoughts on the Saturday card at Gulfstream. So I will wrap it up for Racing Across America. Once again, however, I will hit on the promos because today it's a holiday grab bag day here at the Clubhouse Racebook. Come on down to the Racebook, put your name in the hat, and we will randomly select folks throughout the afternoon to get a holiday grab bag filled with some OTB merchandise and goodies. Should be a lot of fun. That's this afternoon here at the Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. Also at the Racebook tomorrow, NFL Sundays. Watch all the football action and all the racing action every Sunday throughout the season here at the Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. All right, I will be back with the 12:05 post time at Gulfstream. I'll be back in about an hour or so to kick off OTB Live for a Sunday afternoon. We'll take a look at some Tampa and some Gulfstream and more. So that should be fun on this Saturday afternoon. Hopefully tossing out some decent ideas. I was last in on Wednesday, took Thursday and Friday off, but on Wednesday, we looked at Gulfstream and Tampa, and with top picks went 10 for 19, which you could find on the sheet as well, the one sheet on capitalotv.com. So hopefully we can keep it rolling as we wind up the year over the next week or so. Don't forget, I mentioned it earlier. I will continue to mention it for folks who are saying, where's New York? New York is on their holiday break. So Aqueduct will come back for racing on Thursday, New Year's Eve. So no Aqueduct over the weekend, but back in action on Thursday down at the Big A. But otherwise, some great racing this afternoon, highlighted by that Santa Anita card. So I will step back and, as I say, head over to the pregame show at Gulfstream, which should be coming up shortly. So stay tuned, however. We're wrapping up Racing Across America, but back in about an hour or so with OTB Live. We'll see you then.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.